Makakai kena hi'ilave. Kapapalohi maya au maukele. Breakfast with Bob. Breakfast with Bob. Breakfast with Bob.
Poncho Man! We are presented by ES Sports Nutrition, Cliff Bar, Timex, Tanya Puta Resort, Roka, Rudy Project, Slow Twitch, Mr. Tim Reed. How you doing?
Hey, Bob. I'm really well.
Especially because you're not racing. You get to hang out.
I tell you what, it's a very relaxed vibe when you're not racing. It's just a great place to be and hang out. And I'm having a ball not racing.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
But I know you're training.
Yeah, it's been a fair bit of training. I got a race next week, actually. So
what's next week?
70.3 Port Macquarie.
Okay.
So keeping fit.
And you're one of those guys, throwback guy. We've seen you racing in the Speedo, the salute to Farisal Sultan, and the little mustache. Talk a little bit about just being sort of a throwback type of guy.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unusual, but I was sort of a fan of triathlon before I started the sport.
Yeah.
I was going through school and it was actually on television in Australia, so I just learnt about the sport and I was watching guys run around in their budgie smuggler or their Speedo and I thought that's just cool, they're having fun, they're just going as hard as they can. And so that's what I wanted to do, I just wanted to be those guys, and I've kept up that sort of style, and I still feel like I've got a pretty good grasp of the history of the sport. Purely because I used to sit in maths class just reading triathlon magazines instead of doing any work.
So you're reading about Macca and Crowe and Greg Bennett and all those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when I got interested, I think Greg Welsh was still racing.
Yep.
And, he was probably the real inspiration for me to get interested in the sport. And then those guys, of course, Macca, Crowe, Greg Bennett, Simon Thompson, guys like that.
So the first time you went to the line against one of the guys you've been reading about and had posters of, who was that?
Well, I actually raced, I think it was Crowe. I raced as an amateur in Honu, the 70.3 there, and I think I was 10th overall, and he won the race so easily. And I just remember he was running along and encouraging me as I went. I thought, man, this guy's, he's a real champion. Like, didn't know who I was, but I had an Australian thing on my thing, so he just was yelling out support, and I thought, so that was my first experience racing one of those, the big dogs.
As an amateur, when did you have that race that made you realize, I can be a pro and I could be really good at this?
I was sort of finishing top 10 overall in the race, beating a lot of pros within a couple of years. So I thought, that's probably something I'll have to give a try, give up the job and have a real shot at it. I think, when I got second here as an age grouper, and then I thought, there's not really too much to do left as an amateur, so that was just the natural progression. But I have to say, I never ever thought that I would make a living from it. I just assumed you did it for a few years.
Little holiday.
Yeah, like a bit of a break from work, but then over time it actually, I was able to support myself and now my family, and I still pinch myself that I can make a living from it.
That is so cool. When I look at your schedule over the years, in those early years, like 2011, you have 17 races. That's a lot of racing. Do you feel that early on in a career you sort of have to do that just so that people take notice?
Yeah, it was getting noticed for sure, and then the other side of it is you don't have any, sponsor dollars coming in, so
you're trying to make money at the races.
You're relying, nearly entirely on prize money and your savings. So I had to do that, and I think every year it's slowly getting less and less, and I'm just learning that to win big races, I actually really need to cut down the schedule. And
it's almost risky because a lot of times you see guys who year after year are doing 15 races, and it's almost like they're not really committing. They're saying, I'm in 4th or 5th place. That's good enough because I'm racing in 2 weeks or I'm racing in 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other side of it is you've only got so much mental energy. So, there's those races where you can absolutely take yourself to the well. And I think you can only really do it maybe once or twice a year.
Right.
And if you've done that in a race that isn't that important, but you just got sucked into that sort of racing, come the World Championships, you don't have those mental reserves. So I've learnt for myself, when I was starting out, I could dig really deep 3 or 4 times a year, absolutely bury myself. And now it's sort of, I don't have those sort of, that ability to absolutely kill myself like I used to. So I try and save it up for once or twice a year now.
This year has been a really, really good year with winning 70.3 Auckland, Asia Pacific Championships, fastest run. And the one link is fastest run. Last year, fastest bike, fastest run. So it seems like you're really focusing on, okay, this year is a bike year. I'm really got to make my bike stand out.
Yeah, so I mean, 2014, I thought I'm really going to work on my cycling, and I ended up, having probably, a lot of fastest bike splits, and then I looked at 70.3 Worlds in Canada, and they were running 109, 110. I thought, okay, this year I'm going to get my run happening. Of course, I got to 70.3 Worlds, and the game shifted again, and everyone's cycling amazingly. So I think next year I'm going to go into, not focusing on one or the other. You've just got to get everything flowing,
right.
Because, I had a lot of fastest runs this year, but at the end of the day, it's who gets across the line first. So now I'm back working really strongly on my cycling.
And what will this next year? This year there was a lot of 70.3. Obviously, the focus was 70.3 Worlds. What will be the focus for next year?
Well, we've got the 70.3 World Championships on the Sunshine Coast, and so I'm super excited about that. To have a hometown race, it's a big advantage, and so that'll be the focus. But I also want to get over here and have a race, so and try and get myself a solid top 10 finish. So the aim will be able to peak later in the year, which will mean taking a bit more downtime throughout the year instead of racing. I'll probably race 12 or 13 times this year. I just can't do that if I'm going to mix Ironman racing into it. So the focus will be both
70.3 Worlds and Ironman.
I think so. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, and we talked about this a while ago when things were really cranking in Bahrain and Dubai. All of a sudden, there's all these races in UAE, races in Asia. For a period of time, there was Ironman Australia, and there wasn't a heck of a lot more because that whole International Triathlon Grand Prix that had all gone away. But now there's so many races in Australia. For someone like yourself, you really can base yourself from Australia and not have to come to Europe and not have to go to US.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, you used to have to be in the US to get sponsored. And while I still think it's important to have a presence in the US, I think a lot of brands, even the US brands, are seeing how international the sport's become.
Right.
And, they can, if I win a race in the Philippines, they can still promote that via social media, and it's still being followed on Twitter all around the world. So there's value for me racing around the world and being, spending, the majority of the year in Australia. It's not a negative thing like it used to be. So the globalization of the sports, it's real, it's happening. And, I think for guys like myself with a family, it's fantastic. I can be at home, a lot of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're coaching as well?
I have. I mean, that's how I largely supported myself the first couple of years of racing, and I'm not coaching many guys now, just 2 or 3 guys, and I work with a couple other coaches to help them. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I've enjoyed, and I don't do it so much for the money. It's benefited my racing, and I've learned a lot from watching guys like Sam Appleton, what he responds to,
right?
Realizing, okay, this didn't work last year, we need to back it off, or how many hours per week, and it's been fascinating just to learn from guys like that.
How is it going to the starting line with somebody you're coaching? I mean, there's, obviously you want them to do well, but not that well.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was fine until he started beating me, and then I was like, all right, this has got to stop,
Yeah.
It's a bit of an awkward one. When you're racing, you don't care who you're racing. You want to beat them. Yeah. So that wasn't never an issue. But then afterwards, you're looking at, you've got to start putting more time into yourself and less into others if you want to start winning world titles. So
you're sort of weaning away the coaching a little bit.
Yeah, the coaching's really dropped off. I still think I'll probably end up as a coach because it's something I love.
Yes.
Yeah, but at the moment, I've got 5 or 6 years left of probably, hopefully very high standard racing. So I need to focus on that.
When you look back at these last few years, and years with 3 wins, 4 wins, 3 wins, you've had a lot of success in the last number of years. What do you look at one race as your best race?
It's a great question. It's hard to say. It wouldn't be the wins. I would say, sometimes it's...
And not, for most people, it usually isn't.
Yeah.
You learn something about yourself at a race where you might not have won.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Ironman 70.3 Worlds in Mont Tremblant, I made a lot of mistakes, but it was one of those races where I just knew I got the absolute most out of myself. I was absolutely buried. Sometimes they're the most satisfying. You can look at it and you don't have any regrets. It's just the way, you can look back and go, there's nothing more I could have done.
Right.
Sometimes you have a bit of bad luck, but you still absolutely kill yourself until the finish line. I did a race in Phuket in 2011. And it was probably the first time where I was really mixing it with the big guys. There was, there was Michael Raylert and Paul Matthews and good guys. And I got a puncher with 10K to go. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do? So I rode the puncher for 10K, crashed twice, and then got onto the run, and I ran my way back into fourth. And for me, that was as good as a win, because I could have pulled out at 80K into the bike. And so that's probably the race that still sticks in my head as the one I'm most proud of.
That was Laguna Phuket?
Yeah.
And those roads are treacherous. There's mold all over the road.
Oh, it's a hairy race.
And you did that with a puncture.
Yeah, and the funny part was when I punched it, I thought, no worries, there's a motorbike with spare wheels, because they were alongside us a lot of the race. And it turns out they'd crashed about, 2 kilometres before I got the puncture. So, yeah, everyone was going down left, right and centre.
I love that. Yeah. Hey, Tim, thanks so much for taking time. So what are you going to be doing on race day?
I've got to catch up with Cliff Bar. They're putting up the big screen, so I'll definitely watch the swim, and then I'll probably get into the air conditioning and watch the bike, and then I'll be out on the run course and try and learn as much as I can. I think a lot of guys have done well in this race just through watching and then, putting into practice what they've learned. So that's why I'm here to learn.
I love it.
Yep.
Tim Reed has been our guest again. We are presented by EAS Sports Nutrition, by Cliff Bar, Timex, Thoroka, Tanyapura Resort, Rudy Project, Slow Twitch, and Pancho Man.
Thanks, Phil.
Breakfast with Bob. Breakfast with Bob.
And Pancho Man. Yo.